Welcome to JAM350, one design, one implementation, one build. My name is Roger. I'm a designer with BlackBerry at the Swedish office in Malmö. And I'm joined today here by Daniel.
Hi everyone, does this work? Yeah. I'm from a company called Macadamian. We're from Canada in the Ottawa region. I'm a development manager there, and I've been playing with BlackBerry 10 for about a year now, and it's a lot of fun, and really happy to be here in Europe. It's my first time, and it's amazing. Thank you for maintaining it like that. Go ahead.
Cool. So I'm not sure. Okay, we're back to me. I'll do the talking to begin with. So this session is about building BlackBerry 10 applications for more than one form factor. So if you started out building for the Z10 or at least familiarized with it, now when the Q10 is getting out there, what does that mean for your application? So walk through that both from a kind of design and cascades perspective. And we've been told today that it's quite easy. And yeah, in theory that's true, but there's always some challenges and opportunities that you can embrace when working with two form factors that are as different as the Z10, which has a full touch, which is a full touch device, and the Q10 that is combining touch and a physical keyboard. But we'll show you how the framework, Cascades, helps you adapt to this new Q10 device, as well as some best practices and a case study that Daniel has been putting together on how he took a application from the Z10 to the Q10. So essentially, how do we go from the Z10 to the Q10? And have some fun along the way as well. Okay, so the most important differences, which I would like to call out, as I already mentioned, the physical keyboard. But there's also an interesting aspect of a slightly different screen and a very different aspect ratio. So it's a 1-to-1 aspect ratio on the Q10. It's almost like you can imagine that it was built for Instagram. And then that screen is also OLED. And all of these things matter in the end to kind of the design of the application. So the physical keyboard, I like to see that as an opportunity. So already today, kind of BlackBerry users are enjoying the speed and tactility of typing and composing stuff with a physical keyboard. But they also use that to navigate and perform commands in their applications, the really famous shortcuts. So some of those shortcuts are being built into the framework. So T for top and C for compose and so forth are becoming part of Cascades and the other frameworks. And can help you then utilize them in a consistent as well as a kind of easy manner. But it also means that the shortcuts are something you need to actually adapt to. So they weren't there on the Z10 and the 10.0 release. So if you want to utilize kind of the full power of this form factor, you need to be embracing some of those unique qualities of the Q10. And as we're also seeing in the keynote this morning and the type and go functionality, it's a very, very good showcase of how the keyboard support and the keyboard itself can make the kind of flow better on a device that has a physical keyboard. So kind of getting directly to typing is something we really want to encourage you guys in this form factor. But it's not really as viable on the Z10 because there, as soon as you bring up the keyboard, that consumes some of the screen estate, which isn't true when the device has a physical keyboard. So, and due to the keyboard, there is less screen. So we could look at making something really simple in terms of translating to this other form factor. But it's not really good enough because this shows you that it gets really little room left for the content, both in terms of viewing it as well as in terms of kind of scrolling through it. So you will more or less kind of consume the whole screen with the standard controls. So we've taken a few steps already in the framework to help you kind of adapt to this new form factor. So if this is what it looked to begin with, when we first started to sketch on the Q10, one of the first things we did was to first of all, kind of reduce the height of the action bar and make labels accessible as tooltips or in the overflow menus. And we also kind of reduced the height of different list items to make more room for more of them on the screen. Well, that wasn't kind of enough, so the next step we took was to make the titles scroll off the screen, so they are no longer sticky in the top. So when you start to scroll towards the bottom of the screen, the titles go away. And if you're not using the kind of core title bar, we want to expose this functionality as well to custom title bar components. So back to the top again. And we actually took a kind of third or fourth step of optimizing for viewing the content. And that is to make also the action bar scroll away. So the action bar will automatically hide as soon as you start to scroll towards the bottom of a view, and then automatically reappear if you start to go up. And all of these kind of built into the framework, and in order to make sure that there is enough kind of screen left for showing whatever content you have. So the OLED is also an interesting story. It kind of allows, if used well, it allows for good battery performance as well as kind of really sharp and vibrant colors. But there are some important things to keep in mind about the OLED, which isn't true for the LCD screen on the Z10. And we'd like to use two metaphors to describe those. So the first thing is that if you think of each pixel as a flashlight, and if they are turned to black, those flashlights aren't consuming any battery at all in terms of the screen. But when you make everything white, that's consuming much more battery. So in order to preserve some battery, which is very, very dependent, of course, of how well used your application is, then considering changing from a white theme to a black theme could be worthwhile in some cases. So there are some of the core applications that we think will be used heavily that are going black in the Q10. And that's in the framework. There is an ability to have different themes for different form factors. And the second metaphor is instead of considering the pixels as a flashlight, is to consider them as candles. So there are some risk in terms of actually burning out the screen if a certain part is kind of lit too often, kind of being white and so forth. So that can age the screen, create some nasty artifacts. So it's worthwhile to consider, and why also there, in that case, kind of perhaps going black. But we've taken some measures in terms of the core UI, for example, hiding the action bar and so forth, to prevent most of that. It's more of an FYI. So this wouldn't be that nice. So in terms of getting a different type of screen, we're actually in a lucky spot that the combination of screen size and PPI creates a actual size of the pixels that is roughly the same on both the Z10 and the Q10, which means that there isn't actually a need to rescale icons between these two devices, even though they are different in many respects. On the other hand, the Q10 is slimmer and has less width than the Z10. So we've changed all of the core controls to adapt to that size, but you need to be aware of this if you build, for example, custom controls, and make sure that that fits well on the new screen size. So a little bit of a case study here. One of the most problematic areas around going from the kind of tall Z10 to a kind of square size Q10 is absolute layouts and non-scrollable views. So if we take the dial pad here, for example, on the Z10, it's an absolute layout, meaning that if we simply kind of just adapted it to the Q10, it would be kind of rather unusable. So we took a few steps of optimizing that. This was the first take, and eventually we ended up somewhere here. So the kind of lesson being is trying to avoid absolute layouts. I'm sure there are cases where you need them, but also make all your views kind of scrollable by default, and that will save you some of this hassle. And essentially keeping in mind that there are now two de facto standards, a kind of square screen as well as a tall screen. So here's some of the bullets from a checklist that we created when starting to work on this internally. I'll go through them, give you around 10 seconds to consume each point. So less static Chrome. That's what I was talking about in the beginning. Try to make more room for the content by making less of the controls always stay on the screen. Split screen views are problematic. Didn't show you an example of that, but I guess you can imagine if you split the screen in two parts, it will be very, very hard to scroll in each of those small areas. Focus on essential functionality and content. It's not given just by that title, but it means that if you have a lot of content, make sure that the most important content turns out in the beginning of the page. Otherwise, the user won't see it when entering a view. Try to use flexible layouts that scale instead of absolute layouts. Of course, as I said, absolute layouts are fine as well, if you have the time to change them. So the color scheme can optimize battery and prevent burn-in. Landscape-only views on the Z10 needs to work in a square mode. Embrace and align with the global shortcuts. Leverage the keyboard to provide direct action. The type and go example. Don't force a switch between input modalities. And by input modalities, I mean if you start a flow with the keyboard, that is a little bit more advanced. It's good to actually keep supporting the keyboard to do something. So an example of that is having a soft focus of when doing a search, for example. So you can hit enter to select the first hit, for example, instead of having to switch between typing and then touching. And that's it from me. And I'm heading over to Daniel to show you some actual code.
Is it on? Hi, everyone. So I might have to do this sitting down. Bear with me. I have to press buttons and switch between screens and play the piano here. So I'll try to do this as smoothly as possible. Where are you on your slides? Okay, so this is a list of suggestions that Roger gave me in terms of what I should show in my app. Next one. Okay. The way I want to present this to you, some of these suggestions, is by taking an existing app that was locked to portrait mode. And in this case, it's the weather history app. It's a sort of boilerplate application that I developed with another BlackBerry developer to develop all sorts of content for presentations. What I want to do is I want to switch on the landscape mode on it and try it out, and then fix anything that is wrong and adapt. And then I want to turn on the support or just load it up on the Q10 device and, again, see what's going on and adapt. I know the presentation is focused a lot on the Q10 device, but I think when you're designing flexible layouts, you want to try, well, you might as well do the landscape for the Z10 device because you're working with layouts and stuff, and it's easy. And I want to emphasize that this is not an exhaustive look at what's available, all the tools. It's just more to take you around the thought process of converting it and making sure that it works. And then the tools, you can look in the framework and everything it does for you. That's well documented on the Cascade site. So I hope that I'll show you how to do that. So here's the plan. For orientation and aspect ratio, let's just turn on landscape support, like I said, and load it up and see what's going on. For the Q10, same thing. Then we'll tackle shortcuts because now we have a keyboard device, physical keyboard. People are going to press keys. That's a given. And and I think the older devices also had shortcuts that a lot of users will be used to. So we want to see how to add support for that. And then we'll take a quick look at the OLED and the color scheme. So let's start with orientation. Just in case you didn't know how to turn it on, in your code, I'll show you this in a second, you go to the bar descriptor XML file, you just load it up, and then there's a field that is orientation, and you set it to auto-orient. And then you just make a build, and you load it up, and it should work. And let me show you the app now. Yeah, it takes a few seconds. So this is our weather history app in Portrait. So what it does is just grabs data from a server and displays it on the screen. This is the home page. It shows me the weather for London. That's not real data, by the way. You can browse for cities in other continents. You have favorites. You have a settings screen somewhere. You have info. You have settings. So I just turned on the landscape mode, and it was locked to portrait before. So now let's see what happens. Oops. That's no good. We're missing a big chunk of screen right here. Let's take a look around. This looks fine. This is fine again. We drill down to the same view, which is the weather view, and that's still missing. Min max, that looks okay. It's not too bad. The info screen, well, the cloud here is pretty close to the text. We might be able to do something about that. And I think I have something here. This is my problematic city, because I'm on my server. I'm not handling the wave accent on the A. So yeah, the cloud is over the text in this case, and the settings look okay. That's not too bad. Yeah, switch back to the PC. Okay. So, problem screen, please. So we just, I put the screen caps there just in case the HDMI didn't work. Okay, so the orientation problems that we see here, obviously the list items don't fill the landscape width completely. The list items, I didn't mention this, but they're very tall. Can you go back a few screens? See, they're very tall. Like one item takes almost all the screen. It just makes no sense. And again, the info screen and the error screen, well, the cloud wasn't positioned. So those are a few things that we can adjust pretty quickly. So why is the reason the cloud image, the list item takes the whole screen? That's because we were using a static asset for those items. It wasn't resizable. And it was already pre-composed. That's the item right there. So I can't resize that dynamically. And that causes the problem. And for the width, same problem. It's because it's static, and I'm not composing them. I don't have a background that's repeatable or anything. So that's the first problem. And for the info screen and error screen, again, it's just some padding and positioning that we'll adjust. So solutions, width. Let's start with the width. Okay, I need to show you some code. Thank you.
We can see your code.
Yep, it's here. So, okay, let's see landscape support for the weather item. So the weather item QML file is the control that we're putting for each list item. So what I did here to make it fit the whole width is actually I created a bunch of filler items that I'm going to fill in that black space. Okay. Of course, like I said before, we could have a repeatable background and compose like the whole thing, the whole item programmatically. I didn't have access to a designer at the time, so I just made my own filler item. And it's as good as any method, right? It works. So what I did to the weather item code is I added a new image and I made it load that item. And I just made it's in a doc layout, and I made it align to the left, and the original image that was there, I pushed it to the right. And this is the container for the text that you see there. So I pushed that to the left. And I'm going to check this out now and show you how we fixed it. Just load it up. Okay. Switch back to this thing. Hopefully that's going to work. Yay. There you go. So what's happening is that on the left, it's my filler item. On the right, you have the original image that was there. And we aligned the text on the left and the other image on the right. And there we go. That's one problem solved. The second thing that we mentioned was the height, right? Those items are way too big. What we'll do in this case is, I actually already have assets for smaller items, okay? And those came from the original application, which was the weather guesser. And the weather guesser showed you, with the large item, it showed you the current date and for future dates with the small icons, images, sorry. So what I did to make those items look, fit better in the screen is I went on and grabbed. Okay, use small weather icons. So this is how we did it. I created, again, I had to create filler images for the small asset. They look the same size, but trust me, they're a lot shorter. And what I did here in the weather item code, I added an orientation handler. So an orientation handler has a method signal, which is on orientation about to change. And in this case, what I do is I set a variable to, I have a property in my object here, which is images subpath. And by default, it's set to big. And when the orientation changes, I go into my code here. I check what the orientation is. Is it landscape? If it's landscape, I'm going to use the small assets. Let's rebuild and load it up. Yeah, I can't see my screen.
Do you want to see your screen?
Yeah, I need to see it. Sorry. Okay. Clean up. Apologies for the delay, but when you're showing code and building, this is part of it. Let's see if it works. Oh, God. Yeah, it's the assets. There you go. Just a minute, bear with me. Okay. Here we go. And now it's using small assets. See?
Wow.
So we can see a lot more of them in one screen. Okay, so that takes care of the height problem. What else could we do? I think, Roger, you mentioned that you could make the chrome go away, right? On top when you scroll, right? Actually, I haven't found anything. I'm external to BlackBerry, so I don't have access to the latest and greatest things they're putting in the OS. But the thing I had access to is you can set a property on that title bar to be transparent, so you can see the items through it. I'm not going to go and load it up for you because obviously that's taking too much time. So I'll just load up the final fix for you and show you everything that we've done. So that was one thing, the Chrome. And for the info screen and the error screen that I mentioned, I just went ahead and adjusted the padding. Let me show you that.
So while you're showing that, I can mention that those changes to the action bar and title bar, those are automatic, so there wouldn't be much code to show.
Okay, great. Here we go. So small assets. So overlay on the bar. That's pretty easy. Here's the line. Can we see it? Yeah. So when I added, again, like the weather item, I added an orientation handler to this. And when we fall to landscape on that page, I just go set the property of the title bar's visibility to overlay, and it'll become transparent. As for this thing, the info page, pretty simple. You add the orientation handler, and you set a global property to your object, which is the padding of your objects. And when it switches from one to the other, you detect that, and you go ahead and set your variable to whatever you want, to whatever value you want, and they'll be adjusted properly. Same for the error page. Main PC. Okay. So this is the result. Can you move? Yeah. That's with the overlay. Okay. Next. That's the adjusted cloud and sun. Actually, the sun I didn't touch. It's just a cloud. The error page, the cloud's no longer over the text. That's pretty simple. So after that, it worked just fine. And it was landscape, put the stamp landscape on it, and it's good. Let's look at the Q10 now. So let me load that up for you. Yeah, sorry, you need the Mac. Okay, I'm just going to check out this one. Let's load it up on the Q10. Configurations. Okay, so let's look at what's going on. This one has no landscape. If you turn it, it doesn't give you any signals. Obviously, the items are too big again. Like this is even worse. An item takes the whole screen. The settings, they look fine. Browse cities, that looks all right. It's not too bad. Again. There's always the info page. Oof, that's no good. We need to adjust that. Favorite city. Again, that's no good. Okay, problems. Same as before. The list items are very tall. The info screen and the error screen, the cloud is over the text. That's no good. Switch. Solutions, same as before. Let's use the small images and the overlay title bar. And let's create Q10 specific info and error pages, because if we start adding code, actually we can't even add code for the portrait mode. There is no portrait mode. It just loads the info screen. Oh, not there, sorry. So how do you do this?
Sneak peek.
Welcome to the static asset selector. So the static asset selector lets you add let me show you this in the code. So what you do is you organize your assets folder in such a way that you have the 720 by 720 versions of each page. So what I did here is I created the same structure that I have in the assets root folder, but only for the items that I want. So these will only get loaded for this device. Load it up. Was it?
Mac.
Yeah, sorry. Okay. Clean. This thing. Okay. And what I did is I just copied the assets and I repositioned them the way I wanted. I got rid of the orientation handling code that I showed you before. I don't need that anymore. And I just copied them, so of course there's duplication of code, but you could factor out the common elements and just have portions of the pages or controls in the asset folders. So here we go. So I added the small items. The info page is laid out differently. The error screen as well. It's better. And that's it for the Q10 support. Okay, more on layouts. What else about the layouts? Well, you mentioned scroll view quite a lot. I didn't have anywhere to show you in this app. I didn't have anything that went over the screen. But if you've seen my settings, if I had just one more field in there, it wouldn't have worked. It would have just gone over screen. I solved this just by wrapping it in a scroll view. As simple as that. It was 2 lines of code. Right scroll view, you wrap it. There are a few settings that you can adjust, and boom, it worked. That was really, really easy. And I think, like you mentioned, you should wrap by default all your things in scroll views. That way you'll never have this problem. Another thing we didn't discuss is 9 slicing. You can see the Cascades cookbook for that. So that's a common technique in layouting. So you have on the top left, top right, bottom left, bottom right, you have like your corners, for example, and then the other items are borders, and when you resize, it just resizes properly. That's more used in custom controls. Space quotas, we didn't talk about that, but this is a way to specify in stack layouts and Cascades. It's a way to specify how much relatively speaking, how much space it's taking on the screen. So you can say, okay, I have 4 items in my stack layout. I want the first one to take 25%, the second 50%, the other 2 for 12.5. My math is good. That's 100. So that's pretty simple to use. Oh, I have an image here. Do you have it? Yeah. So I added on the left, you see I added a dummy property. And then on the right, I was just able to touch it and scroll to see it on the Q10 device. All right. That takes care of layout. In terms of the keyboard, that's 2 minutes, super simple. You add this wonderful object called shortcut in the shortcuts property of any element. And you specify the key, and you write your function, the triggered function, and the handler, and boom, there you go, do your stuff. And you can add that at the top level of your container or page or whatever, because everything bubbles up to that. What's this? System shortcut. Okay, that's the shortcuts that are for the common stuff across the platform, such as scrolling down one page or one screen or the other, up and down, sorry, zoom in, zoom out, jump to top, jump to bottom, search, next section, all of those things. And these shortcuts, this is how you add it. You just write system shortcut to any of your elements. You specify which type, and then you write your handler. And be aware that these are localized, so they are set to whatever makes more sense for that locale. So, for example, in English, the T key scrolls to the top and the B goes to the bottom, but in other countries, I don't know. See, shortcuts was simple. OLED. I don't have much to say about handling the OLED on my app because luckily my app used all the default styles, as far as I know, and they were all dark. So Roger said you should use dark screen so not to use up all the battery. Good. Now he checked that box. That was easy. But there's documentation on the Cascade site on how to pick different color sets and for your title bars and stuff. So just follow that and follow his recommendation. So conclusions. Adaptation was quite simple. This took me a day at most to do this. My app is quite simple, but if you most of the things could have been done from day one. Really, like it's just, you just have to think about it. Every time you write something about a layout, how do you position things, just think about the next screen. Like I said before, most of the assets were duplicated for the different form factors. You could factor that out pretty easily. And on a final note, don't forget that the current device, the Z10, is 768 pixels wide, and the next ones that are coming out are going to be 720 pixels. So keep that in mind when you design your screens. That's it.
Yeah, and the UI guidelines and the developer.blackberry.com site reference, you probably heard about that before. Here's the link once again, and then we'll reference some of the stuff that's in there. So that's it for us, unless someone has any questions. And the first question goes to this gentleman.
Yes, I just wanted to ask if you tried also, instead of detecting, when you detect the rotation, for instance, you're changing some variables. You can also try loading a whole new set of QMLs, because I also saw that it's possible to dynamically load.
Yeah, I didn't try it. I think you can. I actually asked for a feature improvement to some of the guys here. I said, why can't you make a folder for the static asset selector? Make it 768 by 1280 instead of 1280. I think that would make the most sense, but that's just my opinion. But then, yeah, I think you can load the whole QML just by pushing a new view or something into it.
You said the next device is going to be 720. What about the playbook? How is this work you've done so far going to reflect when we start writing code that works on the playbook?
So the question was around the screen size and 720 and how that works in terms of the playbook. So obviously it's a fact that the playbook isn't 720. It's something else. And
it's 600, right?
Yeah. I think there's many differences when it comes to the playbook. It's a much larger form factor, and it's also a landscape-oriented device primarily. So it's a different story, and you probably want to lay out apps there differently. But that's something we're adding support for. but it's not as simple as what Daniel was showing.
And one thing, I worked on a playbook app last year, and a mistake that we would do consistently is create assets that were too small for the playbook. So we would draw them out on the PC that has a huge resolution, and they looked okay there. Then you loaded them up on the playbook, and they looked small. So you always had to draw them almost cartoonish on your computer.
Yes, and when, as I was talking about, when the screen size and PPI add up to be quite similar as for the Z10 and Q10, then you can use similar assets. But the playbook has a very different PPI and screen size. So it's there you will use different assets eventually.
So basically what you're saying is that the techniques that you've taught us so far, we shouldn't try and use them when designing stuff in advance for a playbook type device. We're going to have to rework all of that when we come to the playbook.
So I can't actually, so the question was whether you have to rework everything for the playbook. I'm not sure if you can answer that. I can definitely not tell how it works from a dev perspective, unfortunately.
From a dev perspective, I suspect the tools will be similar. The static asset selector, their orientation changes, but then I think your real estate is different, so you'll have to design something else anyways, right? The form factor is different. So that's my guess, but I'm not a UX specialist.
So
You've got a static asset selector. I just wondered why there wasn't a static QML selector, which would achieve the same thing.
But it does. Okay, so the question is, why isn't there? We have an asset selector, a static asset selector, but not a QML selector. But it does. Whatever's in the assets folder gets selected.
Oh, so
yeah, the QML files that were there got selected.
All right.
Right.
I understand.
So who has the next question?
To select the assets, since it's only based on resolution, is there any
Right.
other way to select the assets? When you share some assets between one device landscape and the other portrait?
Yeah, so the question is there any other way than by resolution to select the assets? At the moment, I'm not internal to BlackBerry. I don't know. That's what I found out. That's what's documented on the site. Maybe you can ask the experts. Yeah, those sessions, they can answer that. At the moment, it's just this by resolution, and on the 1280 by 768, if you want to handle the landscape, you have to add code for that. But as the gentleman there pointed out, you could load a whole new QML, but you'd have to do it in code. It won't be done automatically.
So over here.
Can I say that you keep using the word resolution, and 720 is not the resolution of the device.
No.
It's the size of the device. Its resolution is 356 or 330. Does that make sense?
In pixels, it's 768. Why?
Yeah, sorry. It's for me, the resolution is dots per inch.
Okay, sorry. That might be my North American term for it.
Terminology expression.
Okay.
Which I actually think is very important.
Okay.
In terms of assets, because assets have a particular size based on their
Right.
pixel size and the resolution of the device.
Okay.
Not just the number of pixels.
Most of the world
Yeah.
talks about it the wrong way.
Yeah.
I guess we just got to work on it till we learn.
So do you want to repeat that to make sure that we get it right, the definition?
He was saying that the resolution to him means the DPI and not the pixels. I was the whole time, so we should redo the presentation now.
It's on the website as well. The website uses resolution
For
incorrectly as well.
yeah, they write it in North America, right? So.
Another question over there.
I think you mentioned this before, but are you guys planning to release a specific core UI component designed just for the QPen? Maybe a different kind of screen or tab or button, or?
So for now, so the question was if we're planning to release any specific core components for the Q10. So currently we're not. So we'll be adding more core components, but they will typically be the same. But maybe, as we showed today, behave in slightly different ways based on the device.
Can you go back to that URL reference on the previous screen?
This one? Okay. So this is, the question was to bring up this screen.
Sorry, I want to make one more point.
Yeah.
You said one thing you can do to put it on the Q10 is wrap it in a scroll view. Can I just say I've had problems with that when I've tried to wrap a list view within a scroll view? Just be aware of that.
You've had problems?
Yeah, because
Okay.
the list view is infinitely long. And so when you can scroll.
Oh, okay. So the question was, question or comment was that he had trouble wrapping a list view in a scroll view, and I assume that you need to get to the end of the list view before it continues on, right?
The list view is infinite. You can scroll. I put the whole screen inside a scroll view. One of the components on the screen was a list view.
Right.
And then you push it up and you've suddenly got a blank screen.
Okay.
Because the end of the list view has no items to display.
Okay. Good bug report.
Can you maybe show again where you can where you tell the program that it knows whether it chooses the Z10 or the Q10?
Yeah. Okay. The question is, can you show me again the static asset selector?
Any other questions while we're switching over to that? Or are
Can you see?
already
Sorry for
done?
the resolution, the form factor, or it's right here. So this is the structure of your project. You have your source and the assets folder. That's where you put all your QML files, all your images. These are QML components. So what you do is you create a subfolder for 720 by 720, and exactly written like this, 720x, 720x, and you start putting the same structure of files and folders that is under assets, but you start repeating it here for the items that you want loaded on the Q10. So, for example, I have an info page. This is my standard info page right here, it's directly under assets, but I wanted a Q10 specific one, so I just created one right under the 720 folder, and it automatically gets picked.
So it's not necessary
Yeah.
to put it in the if question, for example, in the main.
No,
The program automatically knows if there's a folder.
That's right.
and 7 other assets.
the program automatically knows. You can even have a different main if you wanted. It could be a whole different program.
So-
Could you do 1280 times 760 as well? To have the
That's
landscape?
actually, this is the wrong. No, okay. The question is, can you do a 1280 by 768? No, you can't. I mentioned that before. You cannot. And I actually have been poking a few of the BlackBerry guys to add it. That would be fun. Question?
The question probably not related to the asset selector. So after you build the application, does that also keep the structure you showed in the exactly same structure, or the folders other than the resolution will be flattened into
Nope.
just like the old?
It has to be this. Or the question is, do you have to keep the same structure, or you can have it flat? You can't. It has to be the same structure. Okay. It can't be flat.
So meaning if I have a same file inside the images, and the messages exactly same file name
Yes.
and extension,
Yeah.
will that be recognized as the two different files? Or there's some compiling error or
No, the question is if I have images of the same name in the same structure, they are considered different files. But it's not, there is, in the file system, let me try to load up the file system for you. See, this is the file system, so they're distinct files here. I could have icons there, and they're different.
after the build, how it will keep the same structure?
Yes, after the build, the compiler keeps the same structure. Anything else? We can't see with these lights.
So who has a final question? Gentleman over there. No more questions?
Yes.
I'm going to come up and see you later.
Okay.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Okay, thanks.